Well, Facebook seems to be doing some strange things to these videos at the moment. Yesterday's the format was changed and I was slightly squidged. Who knows what's going to happen today? Once again, you might want to close your eyes as you're listening to this. We're in chapter 2 of Ephesians, verse 4. Sometimes in films there is a dramatic turnaround from what was seeming defeat to victory, and this passage describes that sort of transformation here. First 3 verses describing what we are, and then it says, but because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive. That dramatic turnaround, of course, takes place first of all in the Gospels, when Jesus literally is raised from the dead, having been tried and accused falsely, executed, and then buried. Everybody thought that was it. There's no hope of a comeback from that, is there? Well, we know different. Actually, not everybody knows different. Richard Wurmbrand, who was a Romanian pastor after the war, tells of meeting a Russian officer, and he recounted the story of Jesus to the Russian officer, and the officer, who had never heard the story before, was devastated when he got to the point of the trial, conviction, and death of Jesus. He burst into tears. What's going to happen now? Well, of course, what we have heard from the Gospels is that that isn't the end of the story. Death couldn't hold him. He came back to life. That's the greatest comeback of all time, isn't it? The most unexpected plot twist you'll find in any film. The only reason we're not surprised by it is because we can possibly be a bit blasé, or, yeah, we know the story. But it's actually amazing that God did this. And Paul's point here is that he does that in our lives. This is the turnaround in our lives. Those who are sinners, far from God, rebels, had turned against him, unholy, ungodly in every way, under his wrath. And yet God brings life. He brings us back. Because he's full of love and great mercy, he doesn't leave us where we are in death. He steps in and turns us around. Maybe you were used to, in earlier life, hearing bad things about yourself. Perhaps at school, you weren't very happy with school, and they weren't happy with you. You got bad results, poor attendance, the teachers. Well, they said in the end, you've got no future. But and I think the first 2 verses of Ephesians are a bit like that. The assessment is devastating. It's terrible. Is this us? Well, it is actually, yes. But God refuses to let that define us. He steps in and changes us. He raises us from death. Because Christianity is a resurrection faith. It's a turnaround from death to life. And to know Jesus is to experience that turnaround in your own heart. And it's so complete that the only really proper way of describing it is of a resurrection from death. You've been brought from death to life. The death of your old life to the new life in Jesus. Some people actually discover that quite literally. Their lives are going down the drain. They're on the path of self-destruction, and they meet with God, and Christ raises them from the death. He steps in. Your own story is likely to be less dramatic than that, fortunately for most of us. But the plot line is essentially the same. God enters in and turns you around, and you discover there is new life in Jesus, because that's what God does. He's the life giver. He's the life restorer. He lifts us out of death and restores us to life. And the result of that is, well, there's a phrase in the Old Testament that Jeremiah uses: you have a future and a hope. And that applies even now, even when death seems rampant and to a degree is out of control at the moment in this pandemic. Or maybe in your own life you can't see any future. Maybe your future looks bleak because of what's happening, losing jobs and money. Well, put yourself into the hands of the resurrection God. He's the life-giving specialist. He's the expert at these things, and you can count on him. So do that. Entrust yourself to him today and discover how he will give you new life for the future. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.